There's an ancient story from China about two monks traveling together. The first monk talks constantly. He argues about everything, corrects every mistake, explains why his viewpoint is correct on every issue. He debates philosophy, politics, religion. Everything is a topic for argument. The second monk walks in silence, listens to everything, responds to nothing. He walks, observes, and smiles sometimes. After many days of travel, the first monk can no longer bear the silence. "Why do you never argue with me?" he asks irritably. "I say so many things, yet you answer nothing. Do you think my ideas don't deserve a response? Or do you simply agree with everything I say?" The silent monk stops. He smiles peacefully and says, "Brother, do you see that river over there?" He points to a nearby stream. "Do you see how the water flows around the rock? Does the water argue with the rock about which path is correct? Does the rock tell the water, 'You must flow left, not right'?" The first monk falls silent. "I don't argue with you because there's nothing to gain from argument," continues the silent monk. "You speak, I listen. You have an opinion, I hear it. But why should I attack it? Why should I prove mine is better? The river doesn't defeat the rock. It simply flows. And eventually, the rock becomes sand, while the water remains water." The question few ask. Most people would say the second monk is weak because he's passive, that he has no opinion or character. But let's ask a deeper question. Which of the two monks is actually stronger? The one who must win every argument, or the one who needs no argument? The one who exhausts his energy proving truths, or the one who preserves his energy for what matters? The one who wages endless war, or the one who walks in peace? Today, we'll explore one of the most powerful principles in Taoist philosophy, a principle that Western culture mistakenly sees as weakness, but which is actually the highest form of strength: the power of yielding, victory through non-resistance. And a warning: what you're about to hear will challenge everything you've been taught about strength, victory, and success. The Western illusion: what the story teaches us. Before we continue, let's extract the clear lesson from this story. The first monk believes strength comes from proving. The second monk knows strength comes from peace. The first exhausts energy in every argument. The second preserves his energy for what matters. The first needs to win to feel valuable. The second needs no victory. But the story doesn't end here. Let's see how this principle manifests in real life. The example from the meeting. Imagine a work meeting. 10 people in a room. They're discussing strategy for a new project. John proposes an idea. Peter immediately says, "No, that won't work because," and begins explaining why his idea is better. John defends himself. "You don't understand what I'm saying. If you had listened." Peter interrupts. "I did listen. You're just wrong." The next 20 minutes are a tennis match with words. The two exhaust themselves. Everyone else gets bored. Nothing gets resolved. The energy in the room is toxic. Now imagine a different scenario. John proposes an idea. Peter starts to object. But Maria, the third person in the discussion, says calmly, "Peter, I appreciate how you're thinking about the risks. John, I see the value in your approach. Perhaps there's a way to combine both perspectives?" She doesn't join the argument. She doesn't say who's right. She simply allows both sides to exist and offers a path forward. Result: after 5 minutes, they have a solution. The energy is constructive. Everyone feels heard. Who is the strongest person in that room? Not the one who won the argument, the one who didn't enter it. The cultural trap. In Western culture, strength means one thing: stand your ground, never yield. Win every argument. Prove you're right. Observe the language we use. Hold your ground. Never surrender. Yielding is for the weak. Winners never quit. From childhood, we're taught that aggression is strength, that force is effective, that domination is success. But there's a problem. This model works perfectly in one type of situation, when you face a weaker opponent, when you can overpower with force, when the other side yields first. But what happens when you encounter a stronger opponent, a situation you can't control, a force of nature you can't stop? Then rigidity breaks you. Aggression exhausts you. Domination makes you vulnerable. The observation of the sages. Taoist masters observed nature for millennia, and they discovered the opposite truth. Hard and rigid things break. Soft and flexible things survive. The Tao Te Ching says, "A person is born soft and weak. At death, they are hard and stiff. Plants are born tender and supple. At death, they are dry and brittle. Thus, whoever is stiff and inflexible is a disciple of death. Whoever is soft and yielding is a disciple of life." This isn't a poetic metaphor. This is an observable truth. The natural teachers. The lesson of the tree. The tallest, strongest tree, the oak, breaks during a storm. Why? Because it stands rigid, refuses to bend. The wind pushes. The oak resists. Rigidity meets force. Something must yield. The oak doesn't yield, and it breaks. The bamboo? It bends completely to the ground, appears destroyed. But when the storm passes, it springs back up, unchanged, undamaged, victorious. The difference? The bamboo understands a deep truth. There's no point arguing with a force you cannot defeat. Simply allow it to pass. The lesson of water. The rock stands in the river, proud, strong, immovable. Water flows around it, soft, gentle, without conflict. Who wins? After 100 years, the rock is sand. The water remains water. Water didn't defeat the rock with force. Water simply didn't stop, didn't try to break the rock with one blow. Simply flowed, constantly, patiently, continuously. The lesson is key. Constant yielding defeats temporary rigidity. The formula of victory. Nature shows us the mathematics. Rigidity plus force equals breaking. Flexibility plus time equals survival. Soft plus persistence equals victory. The question isn't, are you strong? The question is, can you survive long enough to see the rigid things break? The ancient strategy. Sun Tzu and the invisible victory. The ancient strategist Sun Tzu writes, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. To win 100 battles in 100 engagements is not the highest skill. To subdue the enemy without battle is true mastery." How do you subdue without fighting? Through yielding. The strategy is simple yet profound. Appear weak when you're strong. Give ground when pressed. Flow around resistance instead of meeting it head-on. The result is remarkable. The opponent attacks space. He exhausts himself, striking at nothing. He becomes confused, frustrated, and vulnerable. Meanwhile, you remain centered, preserved, ready for the right moment. The Tai Chi and Aikido principle. This is the essence of Eastern martial arts. You don't block the strike with force. You redirect it, using the attacker's energy against him. The technique is elegant. When they push, you pull. When they pull, you push. When they expect resistance, you yield. They fall from their own force because they meet emptiness. Modern applications. Arguments and debates. Imagine a familiar scenario. Someone attacks your position. Your instinct screams. Defend yourself. Counterattack. Prove you're right. What happens? The more you resist, the harder they push. The more you fight, the more entrenched they become. The argument escalates. Voices rise. Logic disappears. Ego engages. Now you're not discussing ideas. You're defending identity. No one can yield without feeling they've lost something. The Taoist approach is completely different. Practical technique. The method of strategic yielding. First, listen completely. Don't plan your response while the other person is speaking. Just listen with your full attention. Second, acknowledge their perspective without defending your own yet. Let them know you hear them. Third, yield the ground they want. This is not an agreement. This is strategic yielding. Like water around a rock, you're not changing your nature. You're simply not resisting unnecessarily. The magic that happens. The person loses the energy that comes from resistance. They came prepared for battle. You offer none. Their momentum carries them into empty space. Often, they'll argue themselves into confusion because there's no opponent to sharpen their thoughts against. They must face their own logic without your resistance to create clarity. Practical example. Arguments in relationships. The standard scenario. Your partner is angry. Your instinct is to defend yourself, explain, and prove you're right. Result. Two resistances collide. Both push harder. The argument grows. Nothing gets resolved. The Taoist approach. Yield, not in surrender, but in understanding. Listen without defending. Acknowledge without arguing. Allow the anger to flow around you like water around a stone. The result. Anger requires resistance to sustain itself. Without the fuel of your counter-anger, it burns out quickly. Space opens for real communication instead of combat. Important clarification. This does not mean accepting abuse. This does not mean abandoning your truth. It means not adding your rigidity to their rigidity. The bamboo doesn't abandon its nature when it bends. It remains bamboo. It simply doesn't break by insisting the wind should stop. In the workplace, the rigid employee argues with every criticism. He defends every action. He never admits fault. This person feels strong, righteous, uncompromising. But the reality is different. He is rigid, unadaptable, breakable. When pressure increases, this person breaks. He cannot adapt because adaptation feels like defeat to his rigid ego. The flexible employee takes a different approach. She listens to criticism without immediate defense. She yields to feedback. She bends with changing circumstances. She appears weaker at first glance. But over time, she proves far stronger. Why? Because she can adapt. She can flow. She can survive changes that break the rigid person. She wins not by fighting every battle, but by remaining flexible enough to weather all storms. Modern science confirms. Psychological research. Modern psychology confirms ancient wisdom. Studies show people who practice non-defensive communication build deeper trust, resolve conflicts faster, and have healthier relationships than those who argue constantly. Why? Because argument activates defensive mechanisms in the brain. The other person stops listening, starts defending. No information passes between you. Only weapons are exchanged across a battlefield. But yielding, genuine listening without resistance, signals safety. The other person's defenses lower. True communication becomes possible. Understanding flows where the argument only created walls. The neuroscience of flexibility. Neuroscience shows the brain is most effective when in receiving mode, not defending mode. When we're rigid, the amygdala activates. The prefrontal cortex deactivates Creative thinking stops, and survival takes control. When we're flexible, the reward system activates. The prefrontal cortex stays active, creativity flows, and adaptation is possible. Yielding isn't weakness, it's neurological superiority. The practical guide. Technique 1. The 5-second pause. When you feel the impulse to argue, use these 5 seconds wisely. In the first 2 seconds, notice the impulse, but don't follow it. In the third second, ask yourself whether this is ego or truth speaking. In the fourth second, imagine yourself as water flowing around a rock. In the fifth second, choose yielding over resistance. Practice. Start with small things. When someone corrects something minor, simply say, "You're right. Thank you," instead of explaining. Technique 2. The 5-year question. When you feel the need to fight, ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? If not, then it's not worth the energy, not worth the resistance, not worth the rigidity. Most arguments are ego defending itself from a perceived threat. They have nothing to do with truth, with meaning, with what actually requires protection. Technique 3. The water meditation. Practical exercise. Sit by a river or watch flowing water. Observe how water never fights the rock. Notice how it finds every path around obstacles. See how it remains unchanged as it passes through all resistance. Then ask yourself, where in my life am I trying to break the rock instead of flowing around it? Technique 4. The yielding journal. At the end of each day, record 3 things. First, one moment where you yielded and what happened as a result. Second, one moment where you were rigid and what that brought. Third, one situation tomorrow where you can practice yielding. After a month, you'll see a pattern. Yielding leads to better results than rigidity. Technique 5. The and response. When someone argues with you instead of but, use and. Standard. I understand what you're saying, but. Yielding. I understand what you're saying, and here's what I see. And acknowledges their viewpoint without rejecting it, creates a bridge instead of a wall. The deep wisdom. True strength. The Tao Te Ching teaches, I have 3 treasures which I guard and keep. The first is compassion. The second is frugality. The third is humility, not presuming to be first. That third treasure, not insisting on being right, not demanding victory in every encounter. This is the yielding that preserves when rigidity would destroy. Think of great leaders throughout history. The dictators who never yielded, dead, overthrown, remembered as warnings. The leaders who yielded strategically, they endured, adapted, remained whole through transformations that shattered the inflexible around them. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. He could have remained rigid in bitterness. Instead, he yielded to circumstances while maintaining his inner truth. When he emerged, he wasn't broken but strengthened. He yielded again, chose reconciliation over revenge. This yielding won what fighting never could. The final paradox. Yielding is not losing. Yielding is the only way to remain whole when greater forces move against you. You don't yield your essence, your truth, your core. You yield the need to prove it constantly, to defend it aggressively, to force others to acknowledge it. Like bamboo, you remain bamboo while bending. Like water, you remain water while flowing. Your nature doesn't change. Your rigidity does, freeing you from pointless breaking. Final practice. Let's return to the 2 monks one last time. What did the first monk learn after days of argument? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps he continues arguing until the end of his life, convinced that strength comes from proving. What does the second monk know? The greatest victory is the one that requires no battle. And now the question to you. Which monk do you want to be? The one who exhausts energy proving truths that need no proving? Or the one who preserves his energy, walks in peace, and wins simply by existing peacefully? The answer is simple, but the practice takes time. From today, when someone argues, listen completely. When someone pushes, step aside. When someone attacks, flow around. At first, it feels wrong. Every instinct screams to defend. This is ego. This is rigidity, fearing the flexibility that would save it. But watch what happens. The energy remains yours. The relationship remains intact. The truth remains and needs no defense. You remain whole. The softest things in the world overcome the hardest. Water is softer than rock. Water wins. Bamboo is weaker than oak. Bamboo survives. Yielding is gentler than fighting. Yielding conquers. The sage does not argue. Therefore, no one can argue with him. He bends, but does not break. He yields and remains whole. The truth you must remember. Here's what Taoist wisdom tells you today. Wrong is fighting every argument, proving your worth through victories, exhausting energy in meaningless conflicts, and thinking rigidity is strength. Right is choosing your battles wisely, knowing you need no victory, preserving your energy for what matters, and understanding flexibility is true strength. Wrong is being the first monk, always fighting, constantly exhausted, winning nothing real. Right is being the second monk, always calm, constantly preserved, winning without fighting. The final thought. Remember the words of the silent monk. The river doesn't argue with the rock. It simply flows, and eventually the rock becomes sand, while the water remains water. Don't argue with the world. Flow through it. Don't fight life. Bend with it. Don't prove your strength. Manifest it through peace. If this ancient wisdom changed your understanding of strength and weakness, please subscribe and like this video. Share it with people who still think argument is victory. Thank you for watching. And remember, be water, not rock. Be the second monk, not the first. Peace conquers aggression. Always. In the long run, this is the Tao.